What really makes these panels work the best is you folks. You know why you're here. You know the business problems you face on a day-to-day business with all of the things that are happening at a revolutionary pace in the industry, and you know what questions you want answered. So I'm down here, not up there, because I want you to speak to the panelists. This is your opportunity to ask leading experts in the field your business questions and get answers. So feel free to interrupt, raise your hand, ask questions, and get your questions answered. I'd really like to start, though, by asking what industries you folks are in, so we can get an idea as we cover we have a lot of topics to cover today on digital media and content. Who's in the content business? Advertising, distribution, data collection, mobile, TV, production. I'm sure I'm forgetting a lot of different things. Advertising, did I say advertising already? So we have a diverse group. That's great. We're going to be covering a lot of topics. My name is Terry Bienstock. I'm former general counsel and executive vice president at Comcast. I ran the video on demand platform for several years, and since I left Comcast, I've been in both the software business and mobile marketing until that company got sold. So I have a somewhat diverse background in all of the digital media field. I'd like to introduce our panelists, ask them to tell you who they are and who they work for, and so you understand their perspective, and we will go from there. Steve, you want to start?
Sure. I am, good morning, I'm Steve Sobel. I am Global Director of Media Solutions for Salesforce. So I work with our media customers throughout the globe, spanning all media segments of publishing, broadcast, agencies, business information, everything in the kitchen sink. I generally am the hub of activity around our media customers. So excited to be here.
My name is Gabe Kleinman. I work at Medium, which is a platform and a publisher. For those of you who are kind of in the know here, you know that not everyone is able to classify Medium, and so I just define it as both. I'm heading up our product marketing efforts. I'm at a startup, so I hold a lot of other jobs, which I won't go into here, but those are the basics.
Good morning. I'm Nancy Lane. I'm the senior executive producer for CBS News, overseeing CBSN, our new digital platform, CBSNews.com, and social media. So work across those to try to blend the content and reach as many people as possible.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Julian March. I'm the Senior Vice President of Editorial Innovation at NBC News, which means I look after the digital business at NBC News on the network, looking after our brands such as Today, Nightly, Meet the Press, Dateline, and NBCNews.com in all its forms. And besides those kind of mature businesses, we have a little kind of what I like to call a hedge fund of mini startups like Breaking News, Stringwire, and a couple of other interesting little players to sort of bolster up and innovate within that little ecosystem.
So where do we start? Let's talk about the news, since there's a lot going on that's been high visibility. In light of the various platforms that we're dealing with, has brand become more important, less important, or is it about the same? And I want to ask you the same question about media personalities. You know, media personalities more important than it used to be because of the cross-platform distribution, or is it, you know, how is that morphing? You want to start?
Yeah, I'll start with that. Yeah, I think the biggest thing to say is that the walls are down. You know, any talk of people saying, "Oh, they're coming down," is kind of like 5 years behind. I think they're already down, and that means multiple things. But in terms of user expectations, that means that there is no such thing as a wall around publishing time or a wall between platforms and all of that kind of stuff. The user expectation is to be able to just get stuff in the appropriate form for that platform whenever. As far as personalities go, the walls are also down. It means that it means that you can have personalities that really, who are from the television, who play amazingly well in the digital platform. And a great example would be our parenting team, contributor platform we just launched on today, where Savannah Guthrie and her new baby is answering the same challenges as Today users, and they're kind of peers. They're put on the same level as the talent of old is put on the same level as kind of parenting experts, bloggers, and Today fans. And I think that's a really exciting kind of zeitgeist kind of sign of where we are.
Nancy.
Well, I think he's right in that in days past, the personality was the big one who came and told you what the news was that you needed to know. And now personalities are important, but they're not that lead figure in the news anymore. They are someone who you create a relationship with. And so getting to know Savannah Guthrie and her baby, or if you were to look at CBS News today, you will see that we have profiles of all of our female war correspondents, and you get to know them personally, why they do what they do. That connection, they're not going to be that lead star of which dictates to you what the news is, but they're going to let you in and you're going to understand them a little better. And by understanding them, understand the news better. I mean, this transparency that has become all important across all of the platforms is part of that evolution, why we are now getting to know the people who deliver the news, in my case, better.
So how do the new digital platforms play into that? How do you think about delivery of the news now differently than, say, 2 years ago?
Well, at CBS in particular, it's different. CBS has really started to embrace, and maybe was a little bit behind some of the others in trying to embrace the new technology and really reach out through it. It's a legacy brand. It's got quite a tradition to live up to, and so letting down those walls was it was tough. It was a hard thing for them to want to do. They get it. They're reaching out, and I think it makes a huge difference in terms of people wanting to come and consume that news. And I think you'll see on our new platform, those walls don't exist at all, as you say. I mean, they just don't. It's very casual, and yet it's still the same in-depth, important news mixed with some of the lighter fare. But I think it's enhanced people wanting to come and hear the news. You're a part of the news.
Julian?
Yeah, I totally agree. For us in NBC News and Digital, we have to innovate in the way we tell our stories, and that can mean everything from kind of a long form exposition, whether that be an exclusive we did on the Weathermen, the elite special force unit who go in in advance of even the special forces to predict the best kind of time and weather to invade. And we built our own long form experience like that with a kind of hat tip to our buddies at Medium as well, or our kind of longer form mini doc series of 10-12 minute long video where we dig right into things like anything as diverse as the Ukrainian music scene to 1 year on the America's pot industry. On the completely opposite end of the scale, we are seeing huge traction in kind of video or vision only kind of short form 30-second bites which play natively in Facebook, and it's some crazy numbers there. Kind of sometimes in some cases like 15 times what you see in on our own proprietary platform. Great example, if you ever want to make a headboard, go to the Today Facebook page. There's a fantastic explainer which you can even watch during a meeting because you don't have to play the sound up.
Yeah, Julian, since you just mentioned Special Forces and NBC and Brian Williams, I don't know if he was flying with the Special Forces or he was flying with the Bullshit Brigade, but don't you think that the news credibility is being challenged? So if people like Brian and Bill O'Reilly, of course they lie about everything, are lying to us about the details, what else are they lying to us about in terms of news credibility? Over to you, Julian.
Thanks for that. Listen, I'm afraid you'll forgive me if I don't excite you with a really juicy answer about the Brian Williams stuff. We're spending a lot of time at the highest levels looking into that in great depth. It would be terribly inappropriate of me to kind of preempt that investigation before we've found out what we need to find out. One thing I can say is that digital media is all about transparency. My maths teacher, my physics teacher, I seem to remember, also used to scrawl all over my copybook when I was at school, with big red pen, "Show you're working." And I think that digital media provides that fantastic opportunity for us to be extremely transparent about our news gathering process, which means everything from sourcing to aggregation to telling the story as it evolves to even correcting it, as necessary. I mean, when I was in the control room at Sky News on the 7th of July 2005, we reported initially that it was an electrical explosion on the London Underground. It turned out fairly soon after that to be a terrorist attack, and you change your story very, very quickly. Digital media just enables us to be much more agile and transparent about our storytelling process.
So if you look at trends on news delivery, on the news magazines, the network shows, the morning shows, there used to be a very strong emphasis on one or two personalities. Now that seems to be more of an ensemble cast, and even the 60 Minutes of the world used to be a couple of people. Now it's, half the show is them announcing all the people who are possible storytellers. Is that a deliberate process? Is that experimentation? Or is that what the future is going to look like in news delivery?
I think that's what the future is going to look like. There are a lot of talented people out there with a lot of stories to tell, and there is no reason why there can't be multiple people telling you those stories. And in fact, I think going back to something that Julian said, he was talking about doing some longer form stuff. I think it would be a misconception to be out there and to think that people only want in the new era this very short, light material. Medium is an example. Many other organizations find that people still want to understand deeply what is going on, and you have to have a mix of it, and it takes all sorts of reporters now to go out and get the right material. So I don't think you're going to have just one talent that's going to lead in the way that they used to. I think it's going to be a variety. On our new platform, we mix it up all the time. We have some regulars you'll always see there, but we bring in people as they have the news that we think is important that you need to hear.
I think one example of those walls coming down is you see now more and more you have people journalists, fantastic journalists who regularly used to inhabit solely the digital space and now actually reporting on TV. I mean, I'm sure you've got loads of examples at CBS. But
and just as you used to only have the producers behind the scenes producing for those big names, those producers often knew more about an individual story than the big name knew. And now you see those producers coming from behind that wall and joining in the process and being very much part of it. CBS has it in many places. On most of the 60 Minutes pieces, you will see an interview with the producer who put the whole piece together, how they got there. It's called 60 Overtime, but everybody has it, and it's very important. A reporter and a producer will come at a story from a different perspective, and hearing that and understanding all that goes into making up a report. I think that's how you get to the transparency and the accuracy of the report, and people can decide as they hear these different things which is the right emphasis to take for themselves.
And I'd say what you're seeing from the media side, as well as seeing from the technology and the platform side, are these tools that are enabling journalistic entrepreneurs to emerge. And whether they're emerging on CBS and NBC or whether they're emerging on Medium, I mean, you're seeing Andy Carvin and reportedly launching completely on Medium. You see Hank Green and what he's been doing on YouTube. So it's YouTube coming from the platform side, Medium from the platform side, and what NBC and CBS and others are doing, and others are doing is coming from the media side. So it's almost like these two worlds that are coming to converge that are elevating personalities.
Steve, are the platforms and devices forcing this to happen, or is it the consumer forcing it to happen?
You know what's really interesting, and one of the trends that I've seen, particularly over the last year, is a lot of the publishers, whether it's on kind of linear publishing, print publishing, or on the broadcast side, have just been focused on content delivery, just pushing it out. Over the last year, and this has been a global trend that I've seen, particularly in broadcast, people are coming to us, are coming to other kind of companies and saying, make me Netflix, make me Hulu, make me Amazon. Tie a customer experience back to what we know about the customer, what they're consuming, and have a personalized, curated experience. So what I've seen, and it's interesting, I think print publishers were kind of the first to move because they had to, particularly in the UK. We look at Financial Times, we look at Guardian, we look at News UK. They're doing an amazing job of tying a very one-to-one personalized experience around content. I think now with what's going on in broadcast around, Sling TV and unbundling, I talk to senior executives in broadcast that are really in a conundrum right now around what do we do? Do we do our own OTT offering? What can we do to compete with this consumer expectation around personalization? How do we get there quickly? And really, I don't think that there's been this impetus to change, particularly in broadcast, until the last couple of years, but it's something that the platform of understanding that consumer relationship has really become a main focus.
Julian, this changed in Europe a while ago.
Yeah, I think I did. I mean, I think the piece of data that I would bring to bear to tell that story, guys, is the amazing advertising revenue spending numbers out of the UK. I think only last month, where it said that digital, for the first time in February, overtook all other channels combined. So more than 50%. Just to be really clear, it's not clear whether that includes digital outdoor, but the average for the rest of the world is 28% digital spend as a proportion of total spend. In the US, it's 26. So that should give you an indication of where things are and where things are going. But the other point I wanted to make is what we're talking about is kind of pure product thinking, basically, and really turning to taking a real customer and product focus to what we do. And that, in English, means understanding what people want to do and building products that feed and create habits out of those behaviors.
So Nancy, what have we learned on what people want, how they want to consume news?
Well, actually, so I think it's going to continue to evolve. It will get more and more personalized. But in the experience that we've had since we launched CBSN in November, interestingly, we find what was not exactly what I expected. And we find a huge audience for our material on over the top.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's more live than it is VOD. I think everybody came into this business assuming that VOD was the personalized way to go. People could pick and choose. People don't always want to have to click and click and click and click to get where they want to go. And if you have this, so what we did with CBSN was that we merged that experience. We had to build something that didn't exist to make that happen. It was quite complex and rather difficult to get there. But we did, and we're iterating it and releasing changes. And that's dictated not just by technology that allows us to make it a smoother experience, but by the wants of the viewers, right? We're going to want to continue to give them as much as they want to curate out of CBS News, right? But I think they still come to CBS News or to NBC or, to Medium because the kind of content you deliver. So I don't think you can separate the two as being one more important than the other. People aren't going to come just because it's a cool way to get it if the stuff you're offering isn't very good, right? And so you have to keep both of those things moving on the tracks pretty much at the same pace.
Well, and I think there's a premium too on relevancy, which is I think where personalization is really driving things. It's I think again, we live in this world of Amazon. You buy the North Face parka, they're going to recommend the boots. In the same world, a lot of, particularly on print publishing, and Julian, I know you mentioned the statistic earlier, another statistic, you look at companies like News UK, like Financial Times, they now make more from subscriptions and content than they do from advertising.
Yeah.
These are newspaper companies.
Yeah.
That's pretty astounding. But I think that is kind of, again, like the leading edge of where everything is going. I mean, advertising is always going to, I'd be an absolute idiot if I were, advertising is dead. It's not. It's flourishing in many cases. But what I would say is that I think there's a change in thinking around what the business model is and how to better monetize that direct to consumer relationship.
Yeah. I think nowadays we have to consider our kind of publishing businesses as a big ecosystem with lots of different platforms and really properly understand how all of those platforms fit together. For us, for example, it's a 3-stage process really. It kind of starts in your feed by social serendipity. Why do you click on a CBS update or an NBC update in your feed? Why? Because it's telling you something, but it's standing out basically, and that's our job, to stand out. That gets you in most likely to a mobile web experience, and not necessarily desktop. And then the next step then is from that sort of experience to get you into forming a much deeper bond with us, which is to download an app or to sign up for alerts. And suddenly what you've done, and this is classic from Salesforce kind of stuff, really. This is about really getting people down a funnel into a much more engaged state, basically.
So. Gee, this leads to a lot of questions. What is, I also see a trend, I think it's disturbing, others may not, and I'm curious what your take on it, is that the news is being used, the news platform, whether it be nightly news or the Today Show or the morning shows, is being used not just for delivery of the news anymore, it's being used to cross-promote other products on your various networks. It's become.
I'm sorry, that's not really new. I mean, I get back to ABC and Disney, and honestly, that's been going on for years.
It has been. I don't think to the extent that it does now, where it's actually a substantial portion of the shows is cross promotional. Do you see that as continuing on? Are you getting audience resistance to that, or do people love the fact that they find out what's going on USA Network or a new picture it out by Universal because of your studio? I mean, we have to be realistic about it.
Yeah,
I understand what cross promotion's about.
I mean, I've stepped out of a control.
But it's not what you would normally think of as news.
No, but I think what is totally relevant with our digital spheres is that it's just as much about, if you like, the vertical, which is the brand in all its forms across all those platforms, as it is digitally about the horizontal, which is how we are and bigger and better together as a network. So to give you an example, we're on NBCnews.com. We do a lot more kind of aggregating, internal syndicating of amazing short form content from everywhere else around NBCU, not just the news group, CNBC, MS or whatever, but also sports, and local, because we think we've got an opportunity to be the one-stop shop for short form video. And that's the portfolio kind of play is a very digital thing. It is the internet is after all a network. It's about networks, and it's about tying things, binding stuff together.
The editorial folks in the room might want to block their ears, but ultimately, like, everyone is talking differently about how they are viewing their audience, and it's not just about the push of content, but it's about the push pull, and where are there opportunities to not just cross promote but cross sell. There are, I think, even though they're not here, I think Disney ABC is a prime example of having that opportunity where they have a relationship with the viewer, and within their business portfolio, they also have the opportunity to sell cruises, sell theme parks, sell, a variety of other things. I think that, we talk about the walls coming down. I don't think there is acceptance, but I think that there is certainly awareness in many editorial organizations that this is going on, and that certainly there are more motives to, again, monetize the direct relationship than there's ever been before.
Do you worry that as you use the airtime, the valuable resource, for more cross promotion and less news, that you're either alienating an audience or you're marginalizing the importance of watching the show for news itself and giving people reasons to leave and go to other platforms. Do you worry about that? You should if you're not, because that's what I hear. That's what I hear about a lot.
CBS, because I don't think CBS does a lot of that. I mean, CBS does more news, I think, especially on the morning show, than almost any of the other shows. And the cross promotion that is done, from my perspective, is really to other premium content. You know, it's entertainment content in the evenings. It's not cruises, and it's not that other sort of blatant sales pitch for a product. It's more of the same premium kind of content, whether it's news content we're delivering or entertainment content. It falls into that big bucket of content. I think CBS is one of the few that does much less of that. So I'm not tremendously worried with our group.
Gabe, what do you hear from the consumer side?
Well, what I was going to say is also, just as the major players have direct relationships and are looking to cross promote, you see on media creators who are establishing direct relationships with their audiences. And that's one of the things that we actually haven't really talked that much about. We talk about consumer experience. What about the creator experience? There's a tremendous amount of entrepreneurial pop-up activity happening on a platform like Medium, on YouTube especially, where you have almost very mini versions of NBC News and very mini versions of CBS News who are doing the same thing on a much different scale, but they're doing everything directly with the people who they're talking to through Twitter, through other networks and platforms, where they're able to establish these direct relationships. So
I think on the point of consumer, I think the consumer now expects it. I think the consumer.
What's the it?
I think the consumer expects that there's some sort of expectation that there's going to be other things that are recommended, that it may not necessarily be content, but could be product, could be other things. You know, I think
They're trained by the internet.
I think trained by new entrants. I think it's trained by Amazon, Hulu, Netflix.
I'd also say it's trained through platforms and networks. I mean, I will follow NBC News on Twitter, not only to get what they are pushing toward me, but what they are going to retweet to me. What are they going to cross promote to me, whether on their platform or another?
That's right.
And you see that emerging with individuals as well. I follow Craig Newmark because he is a curator for me. I want to read what he writes, and I want to see what he's pushing toward me. So it's the same for brands and outlets as it is for individuals.
I think we should just take a little reality check here. You know, this is a bit like saying that you know, kind of eyewitness reports and it's kind of, you know, journalism is all about using people around you to tell a story. You know, that's what eyewitness reports are about. You know, we just happen to be living in this incredibly exciting world, which is the intersection between news and technology, which basically democratizes storytelling. You know, Medium is a fantastic kind of exponent of that. You know, and we've built one of our cheeky little startups that I was telling you about. Stringwire is all about that. It's about crowdsourcing live video from mobile phones, which is fantastic to get a kind of multi-camera shoot at live events. You know, for example, the marches happening in Selma this weekend, for example. And you know, I think technology just allows you know, users to be part of the story rather than just to have the story told at them.
So what are you? How do you view reaching out to the consumer and making the experience more interactive as a way to bring in the younger demographics?
Younger demographics, yes, but broadly speaking, actually just to improve our journalism. You know, I mean, you know, surely from a purely intellectual and journalistic point of view, you know, being able to choose from 1,000 case studies is better than being able to choose from one, isn't it?
So, well, what are you learning about how young people consume news?
Mobile, intelligent, very discerning, completely different attitude as we kind of previously discussed before, you know, to brands. But I think it's a misconception to say that they have got attention deficit disorder. I've definitely got attention deficit disorder, but there's, you know, consuming as much kind of long form in this kind of bifurcation of duration. You know, which we were talking about just earlier. Medium speaks to that. Some of our long form experiments speak to that. The kind of there is a middle ground which tends to be more occupied by the television, but I think there's a real opportunity for digital to explore those at either ends of that spectrum.
I've certainly seen a lot of media organizations focus on that younger demographic as the force multipliers for their own content, meaning how do you identify those very active individuals that are active in social, that are sharing, that are commenting, identify those and basically have them be your marketing army, your evangelists for the brand. There's been a lot more intention that I've seen put into that, in leveraging those individual connections and having them kind of be the army on behalf of the on behalf of the content.
Are they more brand agnostic, or they have the same inclinations as historical generations, where a brand becomes the center of their universe for viewing, consuming?
You mean
the younger,
more brand
yes.
agnostic? No, there are just more brands to choose from. It's a classic sort of paradigm of the difference between, kind of the world 20 years ago and the world now. It used to be ABC, CBS, and NBC. My world and Nancy's world, we have thousands of competitors. We can't just consider, just the big networks as the other competitors.
I think people are also they're in much greater control of programming their own experience.
Right.
And you're seeing. Again, I hate to be the guy beating the technology platform drum here, but you're seeing platforms like Nuzzle, what Smart News is doing with their social feed. Dig is now doing this as well, where you're able to pull in what are people in my social network who I have anointed as my curators, what are they reading, and how can I bring that together into my own personalized channel? And I think you're going to see more of that in the future. And that may be the version of personalized OTT on mobile. That's kind of one way to look at it, actually.
Well, it's not just on mobile. I don't know how many here have seen or have an Amazon Echo, which is their newest device. Has anyone even seen one? Yeah, I got one for beta testing and gave it to my 21-year-old son, who now does virtually nothing other than talk to this device and ask it questions, and ask it for news, and ask it for music. And it responds. It's the most remarkable voice recognition system I've seen out there, and it certainly is very inducive. I know he brought it with him to college, and now all of his friends are using it. I think that just what you're saying, the platforms just gives this whole wealth of new opportunities to engage. And
Sure.
what do you? This stuff's been around in Europe for a while.
Well, I was just going to say before that,
talking
of wealth of opportunities to engage, I'm not actually doing emails. I'm actually looking at the Twitter hashtag, and there's a great opportunity to engage. I thought, Terry, you'd appreciate us giving a shout out for any more kind of questions that you guys have. What do we see? I spent a long time at Sky News in the UK, and they are doing a fantastic job of getting out onto lots and lots and lots of platforms. I'm not going to speak out of turn because I don't work there anymore, but they view Sky News. They have a certain view. B-Sky-B has a sort of a very definite view about where Sky News fits in its broader B-Sky-B ecosystem. You see what I mean? Which then instructs the kind of level of investments and what sort of profit margins they can expect, or they need to expect out of it. Sky is a fantastic example of an organisation in the UK, really doubling down and investing. That said, ITV. Before I turned up there in 2011, barely had a website, we kind of rebuilt the ITV News website in the time I was there, and it just basically, the great thing about digital media is that you can basically re-enter the market and catch up wherever, or even just re-enter the market ahead. But you've got to keep on pedaling to stay ahead. But that's almost like the beauty of digital media in the way that it's moving so fast.
I think on the topic of engagement, like, you're seeing just some unbelievable things going on right now. I know one of the cool things that I've seen, and really the UK is, I think, kind of the where a lot of these things are starting and happening. And multiple theories as to why. I think it's most of the media businesses haven't been diversified, so there's been more of an impetus to change and to try new things. But customer of ours, Time Inc. UK, they, rather than just push out content, they built a kind of user forum around a common interest. And then what they did was, it was kind of a B2C play, but then it was a B2B2C by bringing advertisers in to sell, not advertising, but sell campaigns, sell things that were going to be relevant to the audience that they've engaged. So we're seeing much more of that, much more kind of, I think, thinking very differently around the business model and again, how they monetize that relationship. But ultimately it's about, it all comes back to content and it all comes back to relevance, and without that being the kind of the beachhead to get the consumers interested and involved, it doesn't really work.
I think you have seen though, or if you kind of take a step back, you look at the ways in which engagement has played out, especially recently. We're still operating in a world where the ways that people interact with content, whether it's written or video, is based on an architecture of the internet from the 1950s. I mean, it is old. Like the list of comments at the bottom or the chat room. And we're trying to figure out ways to kind of bifurcate that broken model through precision inline comments, which we did, and you saw the New York Times do afterwards and a number of others, but also enabling some sort of a rich and deep response to, and thoughtful response to a piece of content through the creation of another piece of content, rather than a reverse cron list of comments, many of which are trolling. So I think there is definitely a role for technology to play in the evolution of the way that interaction plays. And I think Medium has been really pushing the envelope in that respect as well.
Impressions aren't dead, but I think that there's a whole new, to your point, there's a whole new level of metrics that, content providers, that audience development, that are looking at beyond, views and impressions and.
Completely, yeah.
I mean, our key metric is total time reading.
Yep.
We actually are, a few of the commercial deals that we've done with BMW and Marriott, those are based on the time that people spend on the page. They're not, and actually going through the content, they're not spent on page views or uniques.
Hi, going back to the prior discussion about reaching younger consumers, we see shows like This Week Tonight and Colbert Report and Jon Stewart that combines humor with news really resonating with younger consumers. Just curious if those shows have affected like CBS News or NBC News' strategies and your thinking about how to reach younger consumers, and just generally what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great one. I think it's funny because they're very TV-like. They sit behind a desk and all that kind of stuff. Of course, I mean, stimuli around us always affect our strategy. I'm not sure that we're sort of going to jump into using jokes to tell news, but we are experimenting with a game format, a quiz game format, in the form of an app we're building called Incredible, which will be running on Facebook and on apps, which kind of challenges people through a quiz format to be knowledgeable about the news, and that's quite interesting. It's a very conversational kind of flow that we've architected, and we had a really great afternoon a couple of Saturdays ago with the games department at NYU with those guys, just sort of ideating a little bit further on it. So it just leads us to explore other formats like that, and it speaks exactly to what we were talking about earlier about I suppose it's just bringing the walls down again. This world without walls means that there is a sort of opportunity to cross-mix genre and format and experiment in a different way.
Nancy, could you?
Yeah, so we too are starting, not necessarily going to do a quiz show, but quizzes within the content and so forth. But again, I think it underscores the idea of the technology and the platforms making the difference, because the idea of news quizzes and people being informed about it's not new. I mean, let's tip our hat to NPR and say, wait, don't tell me, and start there and say, you know, it has been. And then there's Jeopardy, of course, where it's not exactly news, but it is there. And to comedy shows, you know, if you look at like John Oliver and Jon Stewart, who take a swipe, they don't have to do it in the same real time that news organizations really have to do it. So they can take time and really, it's not really funny. They point out the absurd contradictions in major news stories. And that is one of the things about this younger demographic that I think people write off. They like that. They want to understand it more deeply. And that's where long form comes in. And, you know, John Oliver's take on the pharmaceutical companies was phenomenal. I don't know if any of you saw it, but it was remarkable. I sat there and I thought, God, I wish we could have done this. And, you know, we can, but we couldn't do it in what is the real-time news environment. It's going to have to come out to one of the other platforms for us to be able to take something like that on.
So knowing your audience, generally have multiple devices. Everyone has their smartphone, they have a TV, they have a radio, they have a tablet generally, may have a Kindle, may have one of other multiple devices. Certainly have a laptop.
And that's just my 4-year-old.
Well,
Yeah.
and
It's not-
it's not just the devices, it's what are the applications within the devices that they play on.
So,
Right,
but
I mean,
but
really critical.
but as a content provider, and then I want to hear from the technology side. As a content provider, how do you move people among those devices to your content? How do you try to get them to, if they're watching the nightly news, to go to your tablet, your app, as opposed to someone else's app, to get a follow-up news? I assume that's something you think about a lot, because that's where the advertising dollars are, is if you could contain it in your universe. How has the proliferation of devices changed the way you think about the delivery of news?
I've got two little buzz phrases for out of our stable for you. The first is conversational choreography, which describes exactly that. It's the sort of thing that we care about deeply when it comes to, you know, how does a nightly news fan interact with the brand when it's not on the TV? And that means, you know, the email alerts in the morning, the Facebook page, you know, at lunchtime or whatever. So, you know, we have to sort of really look into that and understand those patterns. Again, all comes back down to understanding user data, what people actually do rather than what people say they do. And then the other is the total platforms. The sales guys and all the sales conversations, even though 90% of the conversation is digital, they are really looking to us for a kind of total platform execution around a sponsorship or an activation or something like that. And the way I see it is, broadly speaking, a kind of almost like a sort of a kind of curational pyramid where, at the bottom is the widest layer, the most atomized kind of layer, which can be curated into our own kind of proprietary applications, which then again can be curated into the finest, 1 minute 30 on the television. A great example of that would be things like, we're back our parenting team contributor platform, where the best ideas from this contributor platform, where everyone is a peer, will make it onto the television. And that could mean that a Today fan in Minneapolis, St. Paul could end up on the Today sofa with the best advice for parents. That's great.
Gabe, so now let's take it from the other direction. How much do we really know about the movement of the consumer from platform to platform following specific types of content or specific brands of content? Or is that still a deficiency in the measurement side?
Well, I'm sure my friends sitting next to me probably know a whole lot more about this than I would. I would say from our perspective, we're trying to take a human-centered view of this. The question isn't how do we make sure that consumers stay within our ecosystem and they bounce from mobile web to app to desktop, all within this medium system. What we're trying to do is understand the ways in which medium content, both from a creation and consumption standpoint, fits within the daily creation and consumption habits of people's lives. We are in the process right now of figuring out what mobile creation looks like. We're in the process of completely revamping our app in a way that is reflective of that. So I can't give you an answer, but I can let you know what the question is. And it's more, how is it contextualized? Because people, the reason OTT exists in any context is a reflection of the needs of people. They don't watch, NBC comedy Thursday nights like they used to. They bounce between content. And that's why I bring up things like Smart News and others, because people want to see what's happening on the web and they want to be able to customize on their own, and different content creators, they fit within a certain consumer puzzle. So,
Steve?
We're seeing broadcasters in particular be very, very intentional about, again, thinking beyond the paradigm of just content delivery, but thinking about engagement and working with, we're working with a number of broadcasters globally where they're literally coming to us and saying, help us build out an audience database because we have no idea who's on the other side of the transaction. And what we can do with that from a cross-platform delivery, whether it's web, authenticated web, whether it's mobile, whether it's email, really taking a platform agnostic approach to delivering content to keep the consumer sticky. You hear so many people now talking about stickiness. We just want them on our platform. And it's less about advertising than, again, and advertising, of course, is a piece of this. But I think in this world where everyone is moving OTT, programmers really want the opportunity to think about how they build out this audience. And then I think in many cases, programmers don't really know what to do with it just yet. But I think that they're having the conversations about identifying individuals in the audience rather than identifying demographics is a huge step. Again, going back to, the kind of, when you're looking from a segment approach, print publishers are already there. I think that if they're not doing it around, you look at what Wall Street Journal is doing around, again, keeping the consumer sticky and not just selling advertising, but selling, direct to consumer. I think that they are kind of, again, the vanguards to show the rest of the industry, particularly programmers, where they need to go around matching up consumers with individuals and really being thoughtful around, what we call a kind of consumer journey.
I think that's really interesting, Steve. It could have just dawned on me that actually we're all experiencing exactly the same kind of challenges regarding the same sort of transition from what is in our world, and to use our language, forgive me, a kind of a broadcast to millions of narrowcasts. That's what it's about. It's about the ultimate nirvana is getting to the one-to-one relationship. There are plenty of challenges there, not least, kind of how do you how do you kind of understand the same person on a network broadcast as on an app, for example, without a login, for example, do you have to get someone to log in via email, or can you use an alternative form of unique identifier? There's cookies, and of course in Europe, cookies are a big issue, and the European privacy laws, are much stricter than over here. But that's what it's all about. It's all about, getting towards that one-to-one relationship, and millions of them.
It's interesting because, I just kind of was thinking about the concept of hyper-local. That was kind of a concept, 3-4 years ago, and it was really answering the wrong kind of question. It's not really hyper-local, it's really hyper one-to-one.
Hyper-individual.
Yeah,
Exactly.
And it's just, and I think also, again, media companies are being a lot more thoughtful around, they've never really, in your business, you've never really had to care about the individual. It's been about the demographic. It's been about the content. But now it's kind of in that game for asserting relevance in a world where there's more content options than ever before. That individual is becoming more and more important.
Yeah, and we're all different.
Well, one of the things CBS did was we made sure, as a starter, right, to launch on as many platforms as possible.
Mm-hmm.
We are on everything and evolving and adding more platforms all the time. But it's one of the things I think advertisers and the sales forces have to be looking at, because they still rely on demographics to a great deal. Companies come and want to know the demographics more than they want to know about the individual. And that's a piece that's still evolving as well. And as you start dealing with the visibility question and you move forward, it's going to be even more complex and complicated to make this work. And we're all working at the same time. No one's there yet. on how it's going to go.
But how much do we really know? I really get very pragmatic about this stuff. I watch my son sit in his room with, he has an Xbox, he has a Kindle Fire, he has his smartphone, he has now an Echo. What am I missing? There's something I'm missing.
How many arms
He's
has he got?
21.
Does he have a television?
And he has a television.
Okay.
And the Xbox hooked up to the TV.
It's not dead yet.
Yeah. it's
Right?
not dead.
So, and he's interacting with all of them at various times and going.
Laptop.
A laptop, excuse me, thank you, laptop.
Yeah.
And he's interacting with all of them, generally all, if not simultaneously, certainly within a short period of time. How much do we really understand about that type of frenetic usage because of the proliferation of devices? And how do we get our message to that generation? Because this is how they've grown up. This is not, they don't think this is unusual or ironic. This is the way it is.
We understand everything but linear.
Right.
I mean,
They don't understand
that's
why we
the
watch
ultimate
TV.
answer.
They don't understand why we watch TV.
Right. And I mean, what's really interesting is everyone is, again, I'm in conversations constantly where it's like, is there a platform where you're tying together authenticated web with social, with mobile, with, all of these different things? And yeah, there is. I mean, I don't want to do an advertisement, but that's what we do. The challenge is, and I think, where I think a lot of programmers are thinking about linear as kind of like the main driver of everything, but they're being a lot more conscientious about curating the experience on all of the other channels where they actually know who the consumer is behind the device.
I don't know they know as much as they need to know yet about the consumers on the OTT devices. They can't quite nail it all the way down yet. They're working on it. They're building the database to try to sort through that, but it's not quite there yet.
And I think the other challenge is also, as we think as hard about distribution as much as destination, and where that sits together in that ecosystem, often the platforms on which we, in some parts of that funnel, are not our own, where we don't control all that data as well. So that's a challenge as well. But does that necessarily mean that we shouldn't be there? No, not as far as I'm concerned.
And you realize what we're working on right now. I have a 12-year-old son who sits with all those devices going at the same time. And by the time he's your son's age, it will be completely different. I mean, we're going to have to run very, very fast. I keep picturing this is a very old-fashioned image, but George Jetson on that treadmill, and we just have to keep doing it.
I mean, you guys,
We'll all be in a holodeck.
you could both be OTT services in that next 10 years.
In that next 10 years.
Watch this space.
Yeah.
For
So,
my sake, I hope you are.
so while this is going on, what are you doing to prepare for the next year or 2 years or 3 years in your pragmatic business plans to deal with this changing of the way people consume your product?
Pragmatic, brilliant word. We have to go in this armed with the sword of pragmatism, but great product thinkers are always armed with the sword of pragmatism. You have to understand what users are doing through the data. You have to make some informed guess and some informed bets. You have to do, and it's you have to be able to fail fast and learn faster. That's kind of the world that we live in. It's all digital cliches, I'm afraid, but that's exactly what it's about. We kind of have to really train ourselves to understand and to get into things like what we call kind of crummy tests, just to try stuff. Spikes, that's a popular phrase in the developer community. Very tightly defined tests where you test a hypothesis, and if it doesn't work, move on. That's exactly it.
I think for us, I mean, we've made significant investments in the platform around B2C, and traditionally we're a CRM company. And when I was on this panel, I was kind of seems kind of odd to have the CRM guy on a panel talking about audience experience, but ultimately what we've seen is it's having that 360-degree view of audience, of a individual consumer, And the investments that we've made have all been around actioning that view of the consumer. So whether it's, communities of interest and having that tied to an operational CRM, or a platform to build apps, or marketing tools. We were talking earlier about, the world of social. We hear a lot about social acquisition. How can we kind of use Twitter to, use a Twitter handle to be the kind of first step in getting to know who an individual is, get their preferences, start looking at cookies to be able to track them. So ultimately, it's kind of taking that, what about the consumer to drive that best in breed experience, which is, where we are and where we're certainly heading over the next couple of years.
That's right.
I mean, I'd say, just to chime in on the platform side of things, and from a creation standpoint, we're trying to create a platform where a number of these content entrepreneurs, news entrepreneurs, or anyone else can jump on, create something compelling and beautiful, and then publish and directly connect with their network. Medium is being built for.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Getting the word out, Gabe, is a really great phrase. The publishing process is no longer brilliant. Finish my edit and send it to the playout server and that's it, done, kind of thing. Or press publish on my CMS and done.
Mm-hmm.
It's half of that, and then the next half is right. Let's get the word out, and that means no longer pitching to the cover, which is a classic kind of old school magazine way of doing it. It's how does this going to play on Facebook? Andrea Mitchell with hundreds and thousands of Twitter followers, she'll be running her story herself. Susan Curry with the interview with the Iranian foreign minister yesterday, she'll be putting that out herself. We've got to look at all these channels, in the search for contributors for the Selma March in this weekend. We are working not only one Facebook page, but multiple Facebook pages and Twitter, and doing it all together, each kind of retweeting each other, and again, trying to come together as a network to pull that together. That's what it is. It's not marketing, because, journalists don't like that word, but, it's like that. It's getting the word out.
It's more about platform than it is about channel. Yeah. And I would say that about social as well. It's 10 years ago, or probably less than 10 years ago, everyone, I have to be on Twitter. And that was more caught up on the tactic than the overall strategy. Yeah. So, ultimately, it's just a channel agnostic approach that everyone is kind of focusing on in order to be successful.
We haven't talked much about mobile. Mobile.
Amazing, we haven't actually.
Right, it is amazing.
Yeah.
I was in the mobile marketing business. We took a platform that was used in France, introduced it to the North American market, and it was a joke at these conferences. Mobile is always 18 months away in the U.S. Another 18 months they'll be there, so they could really be effective medium. Where are we in mobile? How are your products distributed on mobile? And what do you see as the limitations and the promise of mobile devices going forward? Where to start?
Where are we in mobile? We're in the now, very much so. I mean, you know, nearly 50% of our visits come from mobile devices, more so in Today and the Today brand. We call it Mummy Thumb. It's also Daddy Thumb, actually, just to be clear. But you know, while you're with the kids, you know, something like 90% of our visits to you know, the parenting platform, for example, are from mobile devices. It's absolutely right there, and right there not only on our proprietary platforms but also through the social platforms. Clearly, there's a huge, very important sort of virtuous circle between social sharing and mobile consumption. And we're also there from an advertising perspective, because we can, you know, we can treat a video wherever it sits on the web the same with our kind of platform agnostic ad servers. That said, there are still, you know, there's still lots of fantastically interesting work to be done innovating in mobile ad formats. You know, 6-second pre-rolls, for example, rather than 30-second pre-rolls and all that kind of stuff.
Nancy?
Yeah, much of what he says is absolutely right. I think the challenge is going to be in the advertising. The challenge is also, to some degree, for certain segments of the population, the bandwidth challenge, right? Everything's moving to video, everything's moving to mobile, and that eats up your bandwidth and your data. And for certain sets of the population, that is still an issue. You see in some cities where they're making Wi-Fi available, but that's not really the norm. And when we get more of that throughout the country, I think we'll see it pick up even more. But it's moved at an incredibly fast pace. And you would be remiss not to be thinking mobile first in almost everything you do. You have to plan that right at the start, because that's where it's all going to end up. That's where people are having the time in the middle of everything else they're doing to consume your content.
Gabe?
It's a pretty broad question. The first thing that jumped to mind actually had to do with creation. And I was thinking about this from both of your perspectives. And especially given your comment about, you know, above the fold, below the fold, page one meetings that no longer exist. In the last panel, the blue or the gold dress, you know, and how that unfolded. There was no page one meeting about whether and when to publish that on BuzzFeed. And so I think as you see the pace of news unfold in the world, to be able to enable real creation on mobile for as things unfold, the way they currently are through tweet storms. I mean, where are the platforms for journalists in the field to be able to report real time on something beyond a broadcast model? I think the phone is going to be an amazing device that's going to change the face of news reporting and journalism in the next 10 years.
I think mobile is interesting, and it kind of goes back to a comment I made earlier. I think that the content delivery is there. I think the understanding of the individual still has a long way to go. I think, you know, when you look at, you know, Mary Meeker's report on, you know, advertising dollars in television versus time spent on Medium, and there's a significant, I mean, we all know there's a significant gap in terms of advertising money that is going to be going into mobile. I think, you know, DMP and kind of targeting is programmatic is certainly there, getting close. But I think it's also not about advertising as much as it is understanding consumer preference and having a curated experience, which is, I think, where, you know, particularly broadcasters, I think, have a little bit of a way to go in terms of managing that journey.
Yeah.
Hi. So, quick question. I'm just curious how smart TVs have kind of changed your approach, if they have yet. I just got one, and it's weird to see the scrolling update across your screen. You have to update your TV like you would update your computer. I think it's a little different than like the Rokus and the Apple TVs. I'm not as familiar with smart TVs, so I'm just curious if there's a different approach or how that's even shifting this even more to OTT, or if it's not.
There is not really a different approach, at least ongoing at CBS with the smart TVs. It's simply another portal into the content. We have smart TVs in our home, and we have all of the devices as well. I don't know what that says about our consumption, but in fact, I hate to say it, but I don't find the smart TVs personally as easy to use as I do turning on the normal TV, flipping over to a Roku or Apple TV or any of the over-the-top devices. They just make the experience much easier. And now that there are several with CBSN and other news platforms there too, it's much easier. The same with Xbox. You know, fight my 12-year-old for control of the system, right? And now that we're still in Xbox, we're gonna be able to flip over and watch news within that context without having to go all the way back or do something different. They make it very easy, and the smart TVs, they're okay. It's more clicking and moving around in a way that I don't find for myself personally.
I think the big challenge from my experience in smart TVs is fragmentation. In that you have lots and lots of different operating systems and then different releases of the set top of the actual hardware don't necessarily go kind of ask for the same simultaneous software update, so it's very difficult to develop on. But there are some similarities in terms of that this is a world again where you have less and less control over the UI, and you again have to sort of fight for your place on the there's one at the back there, fight for your place on the kind of poly screen and all that kind of stuff. So there are some similarities, but I think from a pragmatic point of view, our immediate focus is OTT and the big and kind of kind of trying to whittle down the number of operating devices we are. That's obviously Samsung. Whittle down some of the number of operating devices systems that we have to deal with.
Hey, my name's Bernie. I work for Smart News. So Gabe, thank you for the mentions. Greatly appreciate that. We actually work with all three of your companies, so we're thrilled to be. My question was, what do you think is going to happen with display and mobile, with the audience going to mobile over the next few years? Obviously, Medium's got some really interesting kind of content, sponsorship-driven things that they're working on. You guys mentioned pre-roll as a huge focus for you, but obviously there's still so much of an abundance of display advertising. What do you think the future is for that?
Well, we're again doing a lot of experimentation around various forms of integration. We are not, we're not afraid of native. We think that native has a place. It's basically about finding the right partners over the right subject matter, and again being totally transparent and delivering an experience which is going to delight a customer and be relevant for a customer. So I think there's a real opportunity with mobile there, and the other thing is relevancy. We haven't really talked about the great thing about mobile is kind of being able to target your alert. So at the moment, alerting strategy has to move from, again, the broadcast model, one alert, Storm Team 4 there just now, to millions versus, kind of an alert like with one of our things, breaking news, where it's tailored either by geo or by subject matter or, or even device, in particular, and whether you're moving or not, for example, and things like that, And I think that brings with it some very interesting business models, which aren't necessarily ad related.
If you want to.
Yeah, I mean, I think, not to beat a dead horse, but I think, advertising isn't going anywhere. However, it's readily apparent that the models are shifting around monetizing direct to consumer. So I think that is ultimately, I think the the advertising piece is pretty fully baked. There's some things that there'll continue to be innovations there, but I think a lot of the innovations that we're going to be seeing are people getting clever around, thinking differently of how they get that, monetization of direct to consumer.
I think the thing that hasn't been figured out yet, I know it hasn't figured out yet, and is another big step in the process is Facebook. There's no monetization there. They want all the content that we create, and we give it to them. Some do for brand expansion, but you're not going to give them all your best content until Facebook comes up with a good monetization model for the people who create the content. I mean, I think there's going to be an interesting challenge there. I think the FT had a big article on it recently, and it's one of the outstanding questions in the advertising field right now. How do you take social and really monetize that?
I think there's definitely a spectrum to consider. On one end of the spectrum is brand advertising, and on the other is more something that's much more transaction driven. Yeah. Medium is currently optimized for deeper brand engagement and connection with consumers. The day that you see blinking display ads on Medium is the day that I walk out the door, obviously. That's not to say that there isn't a multi-billion-dollar industry there that you obviously know, you're the expert here on that. And I don't know, the experiments that we've done with BMW and Marriott, and this was talked about a lot on the last panel, this is where brands are either becoming content creators on their own, which is a separate from a news conversation, or they are enabling the creation of thematic content that resonates with their brand. From a news standpoint, I do think there is one particular area of interest, which is foundations that fund issue-based journalism. A program officer at the Dodge Foundation wrote a wonderful piece on Medium about no strings philanthropy grants to news organizations. Robert Wood Johnson Foundation made $1 million grant, I believe, to NBC, the Gates Foundation, and others. I think it'll be interesting to see how that space emerges when it comes to brands and journalism.
With that, you have a question? It's going to be the last question.
I'd like to go back to the smart TV discussion a moment ago. There was an article last month about a man who was watching his own content through his Plex server, and his smart TV began serving ads from Yahoo. And I think that sort of demonstrates the potential to be able to hyper target some advertising at a very personal level. But I think it also could demonstrate the potential for content creators to be bypassed in the advertising process and maybe lose a little control over what ads appear with your content. Is that a concern for you? And if so, what are you doing about it?
Yeah. Well, I can't speak about the NBC because I don't think we're quite there yet, frankly. But at ITV, we did a lot of work with against AdBlock and AdBlock Plus because they are the enemy of an ad-funded model. Having said that, from a product perspective, it's pretty. It shows that users clearly don't like it, and obviously look for ways to kind of get around advertising. We actually managed to block those kind of ad blockers ourselves in a fairly sort of neat way, but you still don't. You haven't answered the question. We still have to then answer the question or assert the value of your content. These journalists need to get paid. Those runners even need to get paid. That episode of Downton Abbey, believe it or not, has a real value, and it costs quite a lot of money to make. So somehow or other, we have to kind of, as content creators, be able to assert the value and of the content that we create.
With that, we're out of time. I want to thank the panelists and enjoy the rest of the show. I'm sure they'll be happy to answer if you have any other questions.